Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the Twitter Files. Well, it's been a long time since the last Twitter Files release, and we are getting a new one. We're on to number 15 by our favorite Matt Taibbi. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Twitter Files number 15. Move over, Jason Blair. Twitter Files expose next great media fraud. In the first few threads, Matt Taibbi posts quotes by Twitter executives about Hamilton 68. Hamilton 68 is a digital dashboard that claimed to track Russian influence and was the source of hundreds, if not thousands, of mainstream print and TV news stories in the Trump years about Russian influence. The first email that Matt posts here in the thread is an email from Yoel Roth, who was the head of safety and integrity at Twitter. And Yoel says in response about Hamilton 68, he says, "Yes, exactly. It's so weird and self-selecting. And they're so unwilling to be transparent and defend their selection that I think we need to just call this out on the bullshit that it is." In the next thread, Matt posts an email from Yoel Roth in response to the hashtag Schumer shutdown in Hamilton 68. Unlike Release the Memo, this one is primarily being driven by data from Hamilton 68. I'll do another sweep for spam shortly, but as of yesterday, this looked like the right-leaning hashtag about the shutdown, which only got the label of Russian because of the Hamilton dashboard falsely accuses a bunch of legitimate right-leaning accounts of being Russian bots. How we publicly push back on Hamilton is a bigger question, but I don't think there's anything too noteworthy about this hashtag beyond that. Matt then posts another email from Yoel Roth talking about Hamilton 68 and the whole Russian influence thing. In this email, Yoel says, "We produced an extensive description of these accounts during Project Osprey available here. The findings were generally that these accounts are neither strongly Russian nor strongly bots." Now, side note, this is what Hamilton 68, the whole claim was about this Russian influence. And what Yoel's saying is that they found that these are just actual real accounts of people that are right-leaning, which, you can't completely, people are going to disagree on opinions and stuff. And just because something's right-leaning doesn't mean it's a Russian bot or Russian influence or Russian-led. So, going on. He says they're just generally right-leaning users. Virtually any conclusion drawn from it will take conversations in conservative circles on Twitter and accuse them of being Russian. The bot check people use a similarly flawed methodology. In terms of substance, this is truly a nothing burger. It's just a problem of journalists continuing to lean on deeply flawed tools pushed by people looking to capitalize on the bot media frenzy. But try to allow us to get ahead of some of the Hamilton 68 nonsense. I'm working on our own internal version of it. You can view it here. Interestingly, there are already some discrepancies between the hashtags they tout on their site and the ones we're seeing in our own data. Certain hashtags like hashtag Israel and hashtag Trump appear to be completely blacklisted from the Hamilton dashboard. These and other inconsistencies, coupled with the total lack of transparency from the GMF team about their methods, point to a major unmet opportunity to try to educate our comms and government partners about the flaws with tools like Hamilton. Moving forward, Matt says, again, these are quotes by Twitter executives about Hamilton 68, a digital dashboard that claimed to track Russian influence and was the source of hundreds, if not thousands, of mainstream print and TV news stories in the Trump years. The dashboard was headed by former FBI counterintelligence official and current MSNBC contributor Clint Watts, and funded by a neoliberal think tank, the Alliance for Securing Democracy. Ooh, that sounds ominous, doesn't it? The ASD, Alliance for Securing Democracy, Advisory Council includes neoconservative writer Bill Kristol, former ambassador to Russia Michael McFaul, ex-Hillary for America chief John Podesta, and former heads or deputy heads of the CIA, NSA, and the Department of Homeland Security. News outlets for years cited Watts and Hamilton 68 when claiming Russian bots were amplifying an endless parade of social media causes. Against strikes in Syria in support of Fox host Laura Ingraham, the campaigns of both Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. Hamilton 68 was the source for stories claiming Russian bots pushed terms like, quote, deep state, or hashtags like Fire McMaster, Schumer shutdown, walk away, hashtag release the memo, hashtag Alabama Senate race, and hashtag Parkland shooting, among many others. The secret ingredient to Hamilton 68's analytical method? A list. Our analyst has linked 600 Twitter accounts to Russian influence activities online, was how the site put it at launch. Hamilton 68 never released the list, claiming the Russians will simply shut down the accounts. All those reporters and TV personalities making claims about Russian bots never really knew what they were describing. Twitter executives were in a unique position to recreate Hamilton's list, reverse engineering it from the site's requests for Twitter data. Concerned about the deluge of Hamilton-based news stories, they did so, and what they found shocked them. Matt then posts an email from Yoel Roth stating, "At long last, I've been able to reverse engineer the list of accounts behind Hamilton 68 dashboard. The Securing Democracy people have never been willing to release the list to anyone. Full list here." And he includes a link. The dashboard includes 648 accounts as opposed to the 600 they claim. The selection of accounts is bizarre and seemingly quite arbitrary. They appear to strongly preference pro-Trump accounts, which they use to assert that Russia is expressing a preference for Trump, even though there's not good evidence that any of these accounts they selected are or are not actually Russian. Let's discuss strategy for how we want to use this information. I think it can help us refute a lot of the thinking in DC based around the dashboard. Now, just a personal side note, I like to remind everybody that Yoel Roth and 99% of the people working at Twitter at the time were Democratic people. You know, they were the anti-Trump. So he's gotten some flack in the past, but I actually have to give kudos to him and their team. At this point, it looks like they really put their politics to the side and just wanted to get down to the truth of these things and how they're being pushed in DC and the media. So, so far in this thread, I would like to give a little kudos to Yoel Roth for doing the right thing. And let's move on to the next thread from Matt. These accounts, they concluded, are neither strongly Russian nor strongly bots. No evidence to support the statement that the dashboard is a finger on the pulse of Russian information ops, hardly illuminating a massive influence operation. In layman's terms, the Hamilton 68 barely had any Russians. In fact, apart from a few RT accounts, RT is the main Russian news channel, it's mostly full of ordinary Americans, Canadians, and British. It was a scam. Instead of tracking how Russia influenced American attitudes, Hamilton 68 simply collected a handful of mostly real, mostly American accounts and described their organic conversations as Russian scheming. Twitter immediately recognized these Hamilton-driven news stories posed a major ethical problem, potentially implicating them. Quote, "Real people need to know they've been unilaterally labeled Russian stooges without evidence or recourse," Roth wrote. Again, kudos to Roth for this. I appreciate this. Some Twitter execs badly wanted to out Hamilton 68. After Russians were blamed for hyping the Parkland shooting hashtag, one wrote, "Why can't we say we've investigated and citing Hamilton 68 is being wrong, irresponsible, and biased?" Yoel Roth wanted a confrontation. Quote, "My recommendation at this stage is an ultimatum. You release the list of Hamilton 68, or we do," he wrote. However, there were internal concerns about taking on the politically connected Alliance for Securing Democracy. We have to be careful in how much we push back on the Alliance for Securing Democracy publicly, said future White House and NSC spokesperson Emily Horn. I also have been very frustrated in not calling out Hamilton 68 more publicly. But understand, we have to play a longer game here, wrote Carlos Mongi, the future senior advisor to Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. So the legitimate people, as one Twitter exec called them, never found out they'd been used as fodder for mountains of news stories about Russian influence. Because the Twitter files contain the list, they've begun finding out. Quote, "I'm shocked," says Sonia Mansour, who as a child lived through civil war in Lebanon. Quote, "Supposedly in a free world, we are being watched at many levels by what we say online." Quote, "I've written a book about the U.S. Constitution," says Chicago-based lawyer Dave Shesatokas. "How I made a list like this is incredible to me. When I was growing up, my father told me about the McCarthyite blacklist," says Oregon native Jacob Levitch. "As a child, it would never have occurred to me that this would come back in force and broadly, in a way, designed to undermine rights we hold dear." Even Twitter execs were stunned to read who was on the list. Wrote policy chief Nick Pickles about British comic Hole-born LOLs. Quote, "A wind-up merchant. I follow him and wouldn't say he's pro-Russian. I can't even remember him tweeting about Russia." "I'm listed as a foreign bot," said conservative media figure Dennis Michael Lynch. "As a proud tax-paying citizen, charitable family man, and honest son of a U.S. Marine, I deserve better. We all do." Consortium editor Joe Lauria, who was angered to find out he was on the list, which targeted voices across the spectrum. Organizations like Hamilton 68 are in business to enforce an official narrative, which means exercising inconvenient facts, and which they call misinformation. What makes this an important story is the sheer scale of the news footprint left by Hamilton 68's digital McCarthyism. The quantity of headlines and TV segments dwarfs the impact of individual fabulists like Jason Blair or Stephen Glass. Hamilton 68 was used as a source to assert Russian influence in an astonishing array of news stories. Support for Brett Kavanaugh or the Devin Nunes memo, the Parkland shooting, manipulation of black voters, quote, attacks on the Mueller investigation. These stories raised fear in the population, and most insidious of all, were used to smear people like Tulsi Gabbard as foreign, quote, assets, and drum up sympathy for political causes like Joe Biden's campaign by describing critics as Russian-aligned. Side note to everybody here, back in the day, well, I've voted Democrat my whole life. I'm now registered as an independent, and back in this time, I too was under the false illusion that there was all of this Russian influence. And I would listen to certain news channels. I won't name which ones, and I won't name which shows that I would listen to or watch, but there was a particular show that I would watch very regularly, and this was very regularly, if not for a long period of time, always on the show was something about this Russian influence. And I was completely, we were all completely lied to, and we were all completely manipulated, and I fell for it. I think it's important that we all know the truth, and we can all admit, it's hard to say that to say, oh, I was wrong. No, what really happened here is we were being lied to and manipulated. And I know I personally fell for it. So I just think it's really important that we all recognize that we can be manipulated like that and admit to it. And I know I was one of those people. If you're listening and you were one of those people too, I don't want to say that we were wrong. I truly feel that everybody really believes what they're doing is, and what they believe is for the greater good and all that. But this whole thing is just really showing how much we are manipulated. And like I said, I would listen to these news stations and watch these particular shows, and I was 100% convinced that it was true. And now we're finding out that it was all a complete facade. And yeah, so anyways, sorry, I just wanted to say that. So if you're in my boat, you're not alone. And let's continue on with the thread. Incredibly and ironically, these stories were also frequently used as evidence of the spread of, quote, fake news on sites like Twitter. It was a lie. The illusion of Russian support was created by tracking people like Joe Laria, Sonia Mansour, and Dave Shekatokis. Virtually every major American news organization cited these fake tales, even fact-checking sites like Snopes and PolitiFact. Twitter didn't have the guts ultimately to out the Hamilton 68 publicly, but did try to speak to reporters off the record. Quote, "Reporters are chaffing," said Horn. "It's like shouting into a void." Roth was offended by the idea that tweets on certain themes suggested subversion. Can we talk about how incredibly condescending? If you talk about these themes, you must have been duped by Russian propaganda. Again, even Roth, like most Twitter execs, an ardent Democratic partisan, saw that the Hamilton scheme would lead people, quote, to assert that any right-leaning content is propagated by Russian bots. At least 2 other research institutions that used similar methodologies and were cited as sources in news stories were also criticized in Twitter email correspondence. MSNBC, Watts, The Washington Post, Politico, Mother Jones, which did at least 14 Hamilton 68 stories, the Alliance for Securing Democracy, and the offices of politicians like Dianne Feinstein all refused to comment. This was an academic scandal as well, as Harvard, Princeton, Temple, NYU, GWU, and other universities promoted Hamilton 68 as a source. Perhaps the most embarrassingly, elected officials promoted the site and invited Hamilton, quote, experts to testify. Dianne Feinstein, James Lackford, Richard Blumenthal, Adam Schiff, and Mark Warner were among the offenders. The mix of digital McCarthyism and fraud did great damage to American politics and culture. News outlets that don't disavow these stories or still pay Hamilton vets as analysts shouldn't be trusted. Every subscriber to those outlets should write to the editors about the issue. Then he says, for more from the Twitter files, follow Barry Weiss, L.H. Fang, Schellenberger, MD, the FP, which means Free Press, and others. Twitter had no input into this story. Searches were conducted by a third party, so material may have been left out, meaning this is the emails and correspondence that he saw. He could have found more information, but, this is what he's been given. And he says, for more on this story, read the detailed news story at racket.news. And a special thanks to @ORF for putting together video for this segment. Much more to come. Oh, yay. Much more to come. All right. That's good. We haven't had any Twitter files in a while, so him saying much more to come, that's exciting. Not that this is a good thing, but it's just exciting. The truth is exciting to see behind the veil of lies that we've been fed. To me, this is very exciting. No, it's not a good thing that this happened, but yes, it is a good thing that this is all coming to light right now. Again, like Elon Musk said, sunlight is the best disinfectant. So, yeah, this is the best. And it looks like Matt says there's much, in his words, much more to come. So, yay! I will keep you guys updated as always. And thank you for tuning into the Twitter files. Please do me a favor and subscribe. I don't have a lot of subscribers, and information like this is not really going to be spread out there because it's all this controversial stuff, even though it shouldn't be controversial. It's just the truth. So if you subscribe, I appreciate it. And on to the next one. I will see you guys next time. Take care. Bye-bye.